dirt tasted like copper and ash when I pressed my face against the barren ground, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. My hands clawed at the dead earth, 40 feet of cursed soil where nothing had grown for over a century. The devil's tramping ground. What a load of backwoods bullshit. Or so I'd thought 6 hours ago. My name is Riley Cross, and I make documentaries that expose frauds, ghost hunters, psychics, cryptid chasers. I've built my career on stripping away their lies and revealing the mundane truth beneath. The Discovery Channel pays me well for it. Debunked has run for 3 seasons, and each episode follows the same formula. Travel to some allegedly haunted location, set up cameras, record nothing supernatural, then interview the locals who've been perpetuating these myths for tourism dollars. The Devil's Tramping Ground in Chatham County, North Carolina should have been no different. I'd driven down from Baltimore with my crew, Marcus handling sound, Jenna on camera work, and Tommy managing our equipment. We'd researched the legend thoroughly. Local folklore claimed the devil himself paced this circle every night, wearing the ground bare with his cloven hooves. Nothing would grow here. Animals avoided it. Objects left overnight vanished without explanation. Horseshit, all of it. I'd tested dozens of similar sites. There's always a logical explanation: unusual soil composition, chemical runoff, or simple confirmation bias mixed with small-town theatrics. But now, lying on my stomach in the center of this godforsaken circle at 3:17 a.m., I understood why the Cherokee called this place the footpath of the devil. The first sign something was wrong came at sunset. We'd set up our base camp 30 yards from the circle's edge, close enough to monitor but far enough to avoid any complications. Professional distance, I called it. Marcus had positioned his directional microphones at cardinal points around the perimeter. Jenna mounted her night vision cameras on telescoping poles, creating a perfect surveillance grid. Tommy's electromagnetic field detectors ringed the entire site, their green LED displays steady and reassuring. "Readings are normal," Tommy announced, checking his tablet. "No unusual electromagnetic activity, no temperature variations, no subsonic frequencies that might cause hallucinations." He was 24, fresh out of Georgia Tech with a degree in electrical engineering and an unhealthy obsession with ghost hunters. I'd hired him specifically because he understood the science behind paranormal investigation equipment, and more importantly, how to debunk it. "Perfect," I said, adjusting my headset. "Just another night in America's most boring circle of dirt." The first hour passed uneventfully. I conducted preliminary interviews with the crew, establishing our baseline skepticism for the viewers at home. Jenna captured B-roll footage of the circle itself, a nearly perfect 40-foot diameter of barren earth surrounded by healthy pine forest. The boundary was unnaturally sharp, as if someone had drawn it with a compass and sterilized the soil within. "Notice how the trees lean away from the circle," I said into my lapel mic, walking the perimeter with deliberate steps. Classic psychological effect. People expect the supernatural, so they interpret natural phenomena through that lens. These pines are probably responding to soil pH or drainage patterns. Hour 2 brought the first anomaly. Tommy's electromagnetic sensors spiked simultaneously at 9:43 p.m., registering massive field distortions before flatlining completely. "Equipment malfunction," he muttered, tapping his tablet screen. "Must be interference from those radio towers we passed." But there were no radio towers within 50 miles. I'd checked. Hour 3. Jenna's cameras developed strange artifacts, dark shapes moving through frames where nothing should exist. She cleaned the lenses twice, swapped out memory cards, even switched to backup units. The shadows persisted. "Just dust particles catching the infrared," she said, but her voice carried doubt. Jenna had 8 years of experience in low-light cinematography. She knew dust from something else, Hour 4 brought the temperature drop, 15 degrees in 20 minutes, localized entirely within the circle. Our breath began fogging. Frost formed on the dead grass beyond the tree line, while the barren dirt remained warm beneath our feet. Microclimate effect, I announced, though my teeth chattered. Cold air pools and geographic depressions. Except the circle wasn't depressed. If anything, it sat slightly elevated above the surrounding forest floor. Hour 5 delivered the sounds. Marcus heard them first through his headphones, distant voices speaking in a language that predated English. He isolated the audio, filtered out the background noise, and amplified the frequencies. What emerged was impossible. Conversation in what sounded like colonial-era English mixed with Cherokee syllables, discussing someone named Sarah, who'd betrayed her family's trust. Audio contamination, I insisted, though the voices described events from my childhood that I'd never told anyone. Radio broadcasts, cell phone bleed-over, atmospheric reflection. But we were in a dead zone. No cell towers, no radio stations, no communication satellites overhead. Hour 6 shattered my skepticism entirely. Tommy disappeared first. One moment he was adjusting sensors at the circle's northern edge, the next his equipment was scattered across the ground, smoldering as if struck by lightning. No scream, no struggle, no trace of where he'd gone. Just the acrid smell of burned electronics and a perfect silhouette of ash where he'd been standing. "Tommy!" Jenna shouted, sweeping her camera across the tree line. "Tommy, where are you?" The forest swallowed her voice without an echo. Marcus grabbed his gear, preparing to search, but I stopped him. Something was wrong with the circle itself. The dirt was moving, swirling in slow spirals that drew the eye inward. The patterns were hypnotic, almost geological in their precision, like time-lapse footage of erosion played in reverse. "We need to leave," I said. "Now." But our equipment was spread throughout the site. Thousands of dollars of gear that Discovery would deduct from my fee if I abandoned it. More importantly, Tommy was out there somewhere. I couldn't leave without knowing what happened to him. That's when I made the mistake that doomed us all. I stepped into the circle. The moment my boot crossed the boundary, reality shifted. The forest around us aged decades in seconds. Pine needles fell like snow. Branches withered and cracked, trunks hollowed from within. Our campsite became overgrown with vines and kudzu, tent fabric rotting away, equipment consumed by rust and decay. And the voices started. Not the distant whispers Marcus had recorded, but clear conversation directly behind my ear. My mother's voice sharp with disappointment. Riley always put her career first, even when David needed her most. David. My brother, dead at 19 from an overdose I could have prevented if I'd answered his calls that night. If I'd come home instead of chasing another story in another city, building my reputation on other people's pain. You weren't there. David's voice whispered, young and desperate, and exactly as I remembered from his final voicemail. I called you 12 times, Riley. 12 times, and you let it go to voicemail because you were interviewing some fraud psychic for your show. The circle pulled at me, drew me toward its center with a gravitational force that physics couldn't explain. Each step forward revealed more buried shame, more carefully suppressed guilt. The documentary in Tucson where I'd exposed a grieving mother as a fraud, destroying her last hope of contacting her murdered daughter. The series on faith healers that ended 3 ministries and bankrupted families who'd devoted their savings to false hope. All true, all justified, all necessary. All sins I'd wrapped in professional ethics to avoid examining too closely. You feed on pain, I realized, speaking to whatever presence inhabited this place. Not supernatural pain, real pain, human guilt and regret and the things we do to one another. the entity didn't respond with words. Instead, it showed me. Flashes of the circle's history played across my vision like a corrupted film reel. Cherokee families abandoning their children to die of starvation during the Trail of Tears, choosing survival over love. Confederate deserters hiding in these woods while their units were slaughtered. A Depression-era father selling his daughters to traveling men for enough money to feed his sons. Generation after generation of moral compromise, each person convinced they had no choice. Each decision feeding something that grew stronger with every broken promise and abandoned principle. The entity had been here long before Europeans arrived, long before the Cherokee gave it a name. It was older than America, older than civilization, as ancient as the first human who chose self-preservation over protecting someone they loved, and it was hungry. Jenna's scream snapped me back to the present. She was backing away from the circle's edge, camera abandoned, pointing at something I couldn't see. Her face was bone white, eyes wide with horror. "Riley, get out of there," she shouted. "It's not just Tommy, I can see them all. Everyone oh God, there are so many." Her voice cut off abruptly. Marcus was gone too, his sound equipment scattered like Tommy's, another ash silhouette marking where he'd stood. I tried to run, but the circle held me. My feet were rooted in the dead soil, my legs heavy as concrete. The entity was inside me now, rifling through my memories like files in a cabinet, extracting every moment of selfishness and cowardice I'd accumulated in 34 years of living. The night I'd left my college roommate passed out drunk at a frat party because staying would have made me late for a job interview. She was assaulted by 3 football players while I was impressing my future boss with my dedication. The investigation I'd buried because it would have implicated my mentor in academic fraud, choosing my career over justice. The dozens of people I'd destroyed for ratings while telling myself I was serving truth. Every compromise, every rationalization, every time I'd chosen the easy path over the right one. The entity consumed them all, growing stronger, more solid, more real with each revelation. "Please," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was asking for. Forgiveness? Release? A chance to undo 34 years of moral failures? The entity granted none of those things. Instead, it gave me truth. I saw the circle as it really was, not a supernatural phenomenon, but a perfect mirror of human nature. The entity wasn't evil in any cosmic sense. It was simply honest about what we are. Creatures who betray those we love, who sacrifice others for our own survival, who choose comfort over courage every day of our lives. The Devil's Tramping Ground wasn't cursed because something supernatural lived here. It was cursed because we do. The realization broke something inside me. I collapsed to my knees in the center of the circle, sobbing for every person I'd failed, every story I'd twisted, every truth I'd buried for the sake of my precious objectivity. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the ash silhouettes around me. "I'm so fucking sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. It never is. The entity showed me one final vision, myself, 10 years from now, producing another season of Debunked, exposing more frauds, destroying more lives, all while telling myself I was serving the greater good, growing older and more cynical with each episode, until I became exactly what I'd always hated, someone who profited from other people's pain while pretending to be righteous. The loop was already set. Tomorrow morning, park rangers would find our abandoned campsite, equipment scattered, no trace of the crew. Another unexplained disappearance to add to the legend. Another story to draw skeptics and believers alike to this place. And I would be here, waiting for them. Not as Riley Cross, the documentary filmmaker, but as part of the entity itself. Another voice in the chorus of guilt and regret, helping to judge the next group of visitors, the next set of moral failures who thought they were better than the lies they'd come to expose. The circle spun again, faster now, pulling me down into earth that felt suddenly liquid, welcoming. I could hear Jenna screaming somewhere in the distance, but her voice was fading, becoming part of the whispered chorus that had always lived in this place. My last coherent thought was wondering if the next documentary crew would be smart enough to stay outside the circle. Probably not. Humans never are. The Chatham County Sheriff's Department found the abandoned campsite 3 days later. All equipment was present but non-functional, as if exposed to massive electromagnetic pulses. No trace of the 4-person documentary crew was ever discovered, despite extensive search efforts involving state police, federal agents, and volunteer organizations. The case remains open. The Devil's Tramping Ground continues to attract visitors, most of whom report unusual experiences, including equipment malfunctions, auditory hallucinations, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Nothing grows in the circle. Nothing ever will.